Thank you all for coming. My name is Dr. Harold Goldstein. I'm the Executive Director of the California Center for Public Health Advocacy. Of course, Senator Alex Padilla is also here today, and Dr. Paul Simon, a pediatrician, the head of chronic disease prevention for the LA County Health Department, is also here to answer questions at the end of this. As many of you know, we are in the midst of an unprecedented epidemic of childhood obesity. Childhood obesity rates have tripled in the United States in the last 20 years. The epidemic now affects 28% of children in California and as many as 40% of children in some legislative districts. As a direct result of this epidemic, as many as 1/4 of U.S. children now have risk factors that could lead to heart attacks later in life. And it's been estimated that 1/3 to 1/2 of all children born in the year 2000 may have diabetes, may end up having diabetes sometime in their lives. The economic consequences of overweight, obesity, and physical inactivity in California are staggering, estimated to be $22 billion a year, which is particularly important in the midst of the current budget deficit, remembering that Medi-Cal pays 17% of all health care costs in the state. Not only are childhood obesity rates rising, but children are eating out more than ever. Eating out now accounts for 1/3 of all calories that children eat in the United States, with children consuming almost twice as many calories when they eat out as when they eat a meal at home. So with our partners at the Center for Science in the Public Interest, for this study we determined the nutritional quality of all possible meal combinations at the nation's largest restaurant chains that provide nutritional information. We evaluated each possible meal combination and then looked at it in relation to a set of nationally recognized nutrition standards for calories, fat, and sodium. And what we found was startling. Our study showed that 93% of meal combinations at the nation's largest chains provide a calorie overdose, despite the fact that these meals are marketed as appropriate for children. So we've ranked the restaurant chains by the percentage of children's meal combinations that met these nationally recognized standards, the nationally recognized standard of 430 calories per meal. And as Senator Padilla will describe shortly, it's extremely difficult and very time-consuming right now for parents to get this kind of information when they're at a chain restaurant. So let me show you what the rankings were for the national restaurant chains. Here you can see that Subway was the healthiest of all chains, with 33%, a third of their meals, meeting the national standard. But at Denny's, 60% of meals failed this calorie standard. At Arby's, more than 2/3, 69%. And at Dairy Queen, a full 89% of meals didn't meet this national standard. But it gets worse. At Burger King, 92% of meals don't meet the standard. At Wendy's, 93%. At McDonald's, 93%. And at Chili's, 94%. But again, it gets worse. At all the remaining chains, a full 100% of meal combinations do not meet the standard of 430. These are the worst of the worst. Taco Bell, Chick-fil-A, Jack in the Box, Sonic, and Kentucky Fried Chicken have no kids' meals that meet the nationally recognized standard for calories. On the table to the side, you'll see some examples of meals and how many calories they have. And to give you a perspective of what this means for California, here's Senator Padilla.
Good morning. I want to thank you all for being here today. And just, I guess when I learned of this report, as we've been working on the menu labeling legislation here, I couldn't help but just recall a time about 30 years ago when I was a kid growing up, and what it meant when my family had an opportunity to eat out It was rare, and it was a special treat. It was a privilege, usually surrounding some sort of special occasion or a good report card. But today, the reality is different. Parents, particularly when both parents are working, lead very busy lives and turn to fast food restaurants because they're in a hurry. Overwhelmed, often short on time, and tight on a budget, parents turn to fast food chain restaurants as an inexpensive and a quick way to feed their family. Meanwhile, the restaurant industry has poured millions of dollars every year into making sure that their meals are aggressively targeted at children. In fact, eating out, as Dr. Goldstein mentioned, now accounts for more than a third of children's caloric intake, double the amount that is consumed in the home. And again, very different to the reality of society just about 30 years ago. And I think a lot of parents would imagine and assume that kids' meals, quote unquote kids' meals, are exactly that, meals whose nutritional value and content reflects the different nutritional needs of children as opposed to adults. And I think that they would assume that restaurateurs and those sort of putting the menu together sort of take this into account when they designate the kids' meals or the kids' menu. And it's got to be absolutely alarming for parents to learn that the meal that they thought was specially designed for their kids are in fact packed with sodium, fat, and calories, as this report's analysis has brought to light. So what this report shows is that finding healthy options at many restaurants is extremely difficult, if not impossible. The Chili's kids meal, the country fried chicken, crispers, along with the cinnamon apples and chocolate milk, may have an allusion to a healthier option because we see some fruit in that combination and milk in that combination. That specific meal actually contains over 1,000 calories, 1,017 to be more precise, nearly the amount recommended for a child for the entire day. This is just one example of how kids' meals are far from that. So how's a busy parent rushing through a fast food line with kids in tow supposed to know if their choice isn't a calorie time bomb? As Dr. Goldstein points out, 4 of the 10 major fast food chains don't even offer nutrition information in any way, shape, or form. And those that do often make it difficult to obtain. They direct concerned parents to look it up on the internet. Kind of tough to do when you're standing in line and when there's people behind you in that line. Or they'll hand them a brochure if the restaurant either hasn't run out or the employees know where they are, and not to mention the fact that most of these brochures are very difficult to read. So clearly it's not practical, clearly it's not realistic for some of the current practices to actually be helpful to parents. And that's why I've authored SB 1420, the legislation that would require restaurant chains to provide nutrition information directly on menus and menu boards, where parents and other consumers who would want this information can most easily access it. Parents don't have time to thumb through the complex brochures, to search under tray liners, or to click through the internet before ordering their meal. If calorie counts were posted on menus and menu boards, they would already have seen that 93% of all kids' meals combinations are in fact calorie time bombs. And now I know that the state and national restaurant associations are resistant, to say the least, to providing this nutrition to their customers. For the past few years, they've been arguing that it can't be done. Certainly that it can't be done here in California when we proposed this legislation last year, and that it's not practical. But New York City, as you know, has led the way and has required chain restaurants to post calorie information. And guess what, folks? Restaurants are now complying. The same restaurants that say that it can't be done in California are actually doing it in New York City. Which restaurants? Same restaurants that are very present here in California. Quiznos, IHOP, Johnny Rockets, and yes, even McDonald's. And you'll see here the display of a McDonald's menu board in New York City. Not just the menu item, not just the price, but the calorie information that consumers deserve to have. And I would argue if New Yorkers are benefiting from this information, Californians should accept nothing less than this standard that is being provided in New York. In the face of a national childhood obesity epidemic, and California is no exception, California can be a leader, and California needs to lead. We can be the first state in the nation to pass a menu labeling law that empowers Californians to make better, healthier choices for themselves and for their children. I want to thank you all for being here and look forward to your questions.
Is there any evidence that posting the calories has made a difference in the choice that families make in terms of ordering for their kids?
Sure. As news reports from New York City are already showing, there is calorie sticker shock in New York. People are shocked to find out how many calories there are in their Starbucks Frappuccino and muffin, that could easily have 800 calories for the day. And they're also finding that many restaurants are already reformulating what they're putting on the menu so that it has fewer calories. The largest national study done to date shows that nutrition brochures like this are read by no more than 5% of consumers. And I'll show you why. This is the Jack in the Box brochure. This is what the restaurant industry evidently thinks will be helpful to busy parents in making healthy choices for their children. Here's the brochure from Jack in the Box. It has a whole lot of information that is not terribly interesting. I would have to put my reading glasses on to see it. It has all the ingredients for every meal. That's not what I'm looking for. It describes how it is that each of the sandwiches is stacked. And I would think, well, where's the information? Oh, it turns out it's on the back. This is what busy parents are expected to use when they're in a time crunch. They have their children in tow. Is this going to be helpful? Again, the largest national study done to date shows that no more than 5% of people ever even see brochures like this, let alone take the time to put their reading glasses on to study this complicated nutrition data.
Just to add on to that, initial surveys of Subway consumers in the city of New York have shown that when they actually see the calorie count on the menus, on average, the order is 53 calories less per meal than when they don't see the calorie information directly on the menus and menu boards. So that's the first report that quantitatively shows a reduced caloric intake when menu labeling is a utilized tool.
Who studies that?
It's the New York City Health Department that compared calories consumed when people see nutritional information versus when they don't. It's the same study that showed that people don't see nutritional information on brochures like that.
And that's just one of the big differences between the menu labeling bills working their way through the legislature. My bill continues to insist calorie information directly on menus and menu boards. Others who argue for options or flexibility in providing the information, aren't respecting the studies that have been done. When you have the brochures and so few people read the brochure, so few people will go online before going out to eat, so few people will look under their tray liner after they've purchased the food. That information, while being available, isn't being utilized and therefore is not helpful in this fight.
Is yours still 15 restaurant threshold? I haven't seen your bill in a
Yes,
while. Have you
15
adjusted
restaurants
it?
or more constitute a chain.
Question specifically about kids' nutrition. I understand for an adult who's trying to reduce or stay reasonable size that calories might be the most important thing. For children, can you talk about the value of knowing the calories versus the value of knowing key nutrients a growing kid needs, fruits, grain, vegetables? I mean, how does the importance of those things compare with the importance of calories when making a choice of what to feed your child?
Why don't we have Dr. Paul Simon, a pediatrician, the head of chronic disease prevention for the LA County Health Department, speak to that.
Morning. Certainly, we're very concerned about all nutrients. For overall health, all nutrients are important. But if we're talking about the obesity epidemic, there's only one figure that matters, and that's calories. So I don't want folks to be distracted from the central focus of obesity prevention efforts. Those of us in public health are concerned about more general health issues, and we very much are trying to educate the general public about the importance of other nutrients. One of the things we particularly like about Senate Bill 1420, Senator Padilla's bill, is that it focuses a lot on calories, but it also talks about the other nutrients as well.
What are 2 or 3 of the other very important things a parent should look for in terms of nutritional information for their kid?
Yeah, one that's really overlooked is salt intake. And I think that's going to be a big issue over the next several years. We're seeing very high rates of high blood pressure in adults and even in children that relate to tremendously excess amounts of salt in our diets. And we're seeing in some European countries where there's been a concerted effort to work with the food industry and restaurants to reduce salt in the products. We've seen at the population level in some of these other countries reductions in high blood pressure.
Is this one of the goals of the study for either of you, is that that the industry will respond to the change of behavior of consumers, so that if they don't order as many French fries, then they'll put something else on there that's more healthy?
That's my belief, but I'd be happy.
Sure. Studies around packaged food labels. First, 75% of Americans use packaged food labels. Half of people make healthier choices as a result of using that information. One of the key consequences of putting nutritional information on packaged food has been the reformulation of foods, and already in the press we're hearing of major chain restaurants in New York City that are already reformulating their fast food. Just to answer some more of that question about other nutrients, this study showed that 86% of kids' meals were high in sodium, higher than the national standard, 86%, and 45% of these kids' meals exceeded the recommendation for saturated fat.
Can you go over the 430 calorie thing? Whose limit is that? And to get the daily caloric intake, do you just multiply that by 3, or do kids
Divide
by 4?
3, yeah, divide by 3. So what this came from was recommendations directly from the Institute of Medicine. For this study, we took the recommendation for a whole day and divided it by 3. Of course, 3 meals a day for kids, but kids also have 1 or 2 snacks a day. So this is a fairly generous limit for kids. This is for kids, younger kids. The standard was established based on the age at which the meal is marketed to kids.
So it's 430 times 3 or times 4?
Well, 430 calories for each meal.
So
the
times
national
3.
standard for the whole day is 3 times that.
Okay.
Exactly.
So 1,300, just under 1,300. Okay.
This is kids age 6 to 12. No, actually, 4 to 8. 4 to 8, I'm sorry.
And how much more does it go up as the kids age?
For older kids, it would be 560 calories.
Senator, you mentioned before the internet brochures being available. Consumers have access to this information more than ever before, and the obesity problem is still growing. What is your legislation hoping to fix? What if the problem is still getting worse?
Well, specifically with the legislation, we want to put the calorie and nutrition information exactly where the most people can use it, where people can easily use it, right on the menus, right on the menu boards. That's where prices are, and that's where this information ought to be as well.
Okay. And then if family goes to KFC and none of their meals fit that requirement, I don't think somebody's going to turn around and leave. Are they
And you know, that's I think part of the legislation. We're not restricting or banning anything. We're not telling people what they can or cannot order. We're not telling restaurants what they can or cannot sell. All we're suggesting is that we make this information available, and available in a way that people can most readily use it. And from that point on, have them make their own decision. And studies have shown when people see it, most people utilize it. And when most people utilize that, they are ordering a little bit healthier.
And just a quick follow-up, chain restaurants.
Yes.
That's the only, that's only for this? Why not all restaurants?
Well, we wanted to be a little cognizant of family-owned restaurants and some very small operations. Clearly, when you talk about chain restaurants like the ones we've talked about today, they have the means to not only compile the nutrition information for what they're selling, but to turn around and print it on the menus and the menu boards.
In the future?
And it becomes a guide. I mean, you go to a chain restaurant and you order a certain type of meal. When you go to independent or family-owned restaurant, you know when you're ordering a comparable meal, what those numbers are likely to be.
In the future, would you hope to have this for all restaurants?
You know, this is the first step. We're trying to accomplish the first step.
If I can say one other thing about chain restaurants is one of the things that makes it a chain restaurant is they have very standardized recipes and standardized meals. That's very different than a family-owned restaurant that actually has a chef in the back that's making an individual meal. At any of these chain restaurants, they have very standardized portions, meals, ingredients.